So now we are on to the fifth and final video in our video series. And up to now we've gone through the process of finding a question we want to know the answer to, designing an experiment to answer that question, and in our last video we actually performed our experiment. Now it's time to take a look at our results and draw some conclusions based on what we found.
Exactly. So I think we should just dive straight in. So just to recap, we went down to Howth for our experiment. We passed 1 litre of seawater through our filter stack and we sampled from 3 different areas in the harbour. So now what we have to do is look at our filters and see what we can find.
And if you remember, our specific question is how much microplastic is in the sea at Howth Harbour. So the thing we particularly want to do here is count the number of pieces of microplastic in our sample.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to see what we find. The animal. Oh, we have live things on our filter. Whoa. Wow. Very cool.
A little unexpected.
Yeah. Now this could be a microplastic, possibly. So let's mark that one down. So this kind of red fiber could be a microplastic. So we have a lot of stuff on our filter, but we're not sure if all of it's microplastic. A lot of this looks like kind of animals and bits of seaweed and little things like that. So again, on this filter, we're seeing a lot of living material, but I'm not seeing much plastics yet. So now we're going to start looking at our samples from location 3. And what's really interesting about this is that at the time of taking the samples, we noticed that we could see a lot of rubbish in the sea. We could see a lot of oil in the sea, and it was the dirtiest we had seen it in quite a while. So it'll be interesting to have a look at our filters. And straight away, before even using the microscope, I could see that there's a lot of plastic and other material on this filter. So I'll just show you. So straight away I can see there's a piece of polystyrene, I can see some red fibers, so let's have a little look under the microscope now. Not sure about this one. Oh, that tells us it was just a bubble. So this one is the piece of polystyrene that we could see earlier on, and this is what it looks like close up. So this is obviously a piece of polystyrene that could have broken down from a larger macroplastic or a bigger piece of plastic, maybe broken down over time and carried around in the sea. It's kind of interesting because you don't have to use these filters for collecting microplastics. You can also use them to collect small animals like this or just see what's going on under the sea. Look how many! Wow.
Okay, so Neve, now we've taken a look at our filters and we've counted how much microplastic is on them. Here is a table of what we found.
So in total we found 9 pieces of microplastics in our 3 litres of seawater. So what can we say about this?
Well, we now know that Hoth Harbour has microplastics in the water, and in our sample we found 3 pieces per litre. But there's a couple of things that we need to bear in mind and talk about. We need to talk about some of the limitations of our experiment. Now, another way of saying limitations is that there's some things that our experiment can tell us, and there's other things that it can't necessarily tell us. And so the first of the limitations of our experiment is that when we were going through the filters, we noticed a lot of stuff on the filters that we couldn't really work out what they were. So some of this might have been microplastic, but some of it might not. So we may have over or underestimated how much microplastic is in our samples.
And there's another limitation here, which is that we only looked at 3 spots at the harbour, which is better than looking at 1 spot, but it's also not really enough to draw a conclusion about the entire harbour.
No, it's not, Neve, but 3 samples was just about all that you and I could handle alone. Now, it might be different if we had more help. But if we think about it, there is a lot of water down in Hoth Harbour, and while 3 samples is better than 1, there are thousands and thousands of litres of water in the entire harbour. We can think about this a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. So right now, we only have a few pieces of the jigsaw puzzle because we've only taken 3 samples. So it's a little bit difficult for us to tell what the bigger picture looks like. And the more samples that we have, the more we can start to piece together that picture.
So there's nothing wrong with the limitations of our experiment as long as we're honest and we tell people what we find. And maybe there's people out there watching this video who might go out and collect more samples, and then we'll have a better picture.
Hopefully so. And another thing to bear in mind about our experiment is that we took all of our samples on the same day. And one of the amazing things about the sea is that it changes every single day. We've been there on different days, Neve, and you know as well as I do that it's like an entirely different world sometimes. Sometimes the water is very calm and very clear, but other times it's very choppy and quite unclear. It changes depending on the weather, the time of day, the time of year, and so many different things. So it's also likely that those kind of things would also impact the amount of microplastic in the water.
Maybe, for example, a strong wind could drag more microplastics into the harbour. We just don't know, and there's so many other questions we could ask.
Remember, the scientific process is a cycle, so this isn't the end of the road for this question. In fact, as is often the case in science, by exploring one question, we've discovered even more questions that we want to know the answer to, like, what's the impact of the weather on the amount of microplastics that we collect?
And maybe it's not us that answers them. Maybe it's you guys at home. You could come up with a follow-up question and use the scientific process to answer it.
Or maybe your questions will be about something entirely different. You could ask, where's the best place in your garden to grow a plant?
Or you could ask, how much does it rain in a week, and collect rainwater?
And you could even do that with people living in different places and compare.
But if you do try out your own experiments and build some of your own tools like we did, please show us on Twitter or in the comments below. We'd really like to see them. And we can try and help you along the way if you have any questions.
But also remember that if you do get stuck, you can also work with other people. These could be people in your community, from your school or your university, or, for example, if your question was related to the sea, maybe you could look for some help from scuba divers, fishermen, sea swimmers, or people who live by the sea. Everybody will have something different to contribute and their own perspective on the problem.
So that's the end of our Science by the Sea series. We hope you've enjoyed it. We definitely have. So we've taken you through the entire scientific process from the very beginning to the very end. We've also shown you how you can make your own tools to answer your own scientific questions. So we really hope that you take this information and apply it to any question you've been curious about.